Welcome to Edge Grip Podcast. Another episode. We don't record a lot of episodes, do we, Nabil? Last
We took a little
one,
break.
last one was like 6 months ago.
Do you remember the number of the episode we're on?
I don't remember. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't remember.
17, 18,
I don't know.
something.
I don't know.
We keep good track of stuff, apparently.
We keep track of stuff very well. Uh, so today we have a really special guest. I mean that guy started riding at the age of 3, and when I say 3, it's not 3 years, it's 3 months. At the age of 3 months, he was already lapping lapping a racetrack on an MV. His name's Robbie Peterson, and you guys probably know him as Cam Peterson's dad, but
There we go. That's it. Yep.
yeah, but he's actually way more famous than Cam. So we brought the original here. How are you?
Wow.
How are you, Robbie?
Very good. Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Appreciate the invite to come onto your show. And yeah, it's lots of stories, we hope, but yeah, really appreciate giving me the opportunity to have a chat with you guys. So yeah.
So tell us about
Thank you for
tell
joining us. We're honored by your presence.
yeah
No, thanks, Bill. Thank you.
tell us about that lap on the MV. How did that happen?
Well, I was born into motorsports. My dad's brother, like obviously my uncle, he was obviously a lot older than us, but he was a hotshot in the country I grew up in was called Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe. And Rhodesia had like a pretty strong racing scene. And honestly, between the First and Second World War, he was a hotshot in Rhodesia. And my dad had a go at racing, but apparently he wasn't very good. But he really enjoyed the organizational side of it. So he became the chairman of the Motorsport Association. And so within all that, we had some world champions in the 60s. And one of them was a guy called Gary Hocking. So I was born in November of 61, and Gary had won the 61 World Championship. And he came out to Rhodesia in 62. And apparently he put me on the tank of his MV and did a lap around the track. So yeah, and then just like I said, a big family deal. I mean, my playground was the racetracks when we were kids. Older brothers, cousins. Who my cousin raced in Europe a little bit. So just born into it. As I said, Rhodesia had some hot shots. Jim Redmond was one of them. I think we won more world championships than America for a long time. It took a while for America to pass us in world championship counts. So obviously, don't remember anything about that. But man, I have such great memories growing up. And fast forward a little bit, I was probably about 6 or 7, and Mike Hailwood came to race in Rhodesia with the Honda 256. And I'd learned to read, and I just remember there was a British magazine called Motorcycle Weekly, I think it was. And at 6, 7 years old, I was reading that thing cover to cover, like trials, speedway, you name it. I knew all this. And I just remember they had Mike's area like enclosed. Had a camper there. And for me, I just used to associate Mike Hellworth and Agostini. So as kids think, oh man, well, that must be really good friends. So I kind of walked through the enclosure and Mike's coming out of the camper, and I look over and I go, "Hey, Mike, did you bring Ego with you?" And I remember this so vividly. He just looked at me and says, "No, not this time, Sonny." So yeah, just great experiences growing up. A lot of motorsport stuff, and even on the car side, paid a lot of attention to cars and speedway, like I said, and motocross, just everything.
Was that the 6-cylinder Honda?
That's the one that Mike rode. Yeah, yep. And he came over there, and it was like more of a demonstration. But Jim Redmond, because Honda had pulled out of racing at that stage, that's when they kind of pulled out of it. But for some reason, he came out. Jim Redmond had won a whole lot of world championships on the Honda, but he was on a Yamaha for that event. So, and my cousin was riding, I think it was a matchless Matisse, G50 Matisse. My oldest brother Keith was racing. So, but like I think I was 6, maybe 7 years old. And once again, all those memories, the sound of that 256, even as a 6 or 7 year old, incredible, just mind boggling. And talking about the sounds, I mean, it's just talking about 1962, we had a long player record, a vinyl record. And I remember when I was, once again, 6 or 7, 1966, 67. Our family used to sit around our gramophone and we'd put on the Isle of Man from 62 and Murray Walker would be going, oh, here comes Bob McIntyre on his, and all those sounds of just special, special. Yeah. The days before silencers, obviously.
Yeah.
What a history. So, how did you get to the US?
Oh, yeah. It's obviously a long story, but so growing up in Rhodesia, like I said, road racing was really strong in the 60s. But I was a kid. I mean, 10 years old or something. But for me, it was just like I was going to become a road racer. Couldn't tell you why, but it was a natural thing. I am going to go and race. And once again, reading all these international magazines and stuff was like, just seemed like a natural thing to do. Then Rhodesia went through a pretty dramatic war, and we were isolated by the rest of the world, politically isolated. We were kind of regarded as pariah state and stuff. So there were sanctions, and racing almost died. The road racing kind of went away a little bit. But I'd been racing a little bit of flat track, well, quite a lot of flat track. What we call flat track is very different to American flat track. It's more almost like a karting track on dirt. So a completely different technique. Sort of more like supermoto. The original tracks, they actually were oil-based. They used to dump oil on these things. So I guess environmentalists wouldn't like that too much these days. But so I grew up with that, a little bit of motocross, quite a bit of motocross, but also had some injuries. As I said, road racing was dead. My brother-in-law had a Yamaha TR2. So when I was about 15, there was no extra racing, but there were a couple of guys who used to go and ride around the local racetrack. And so I went out to our local racetrack, which is called Donnybrook Park, and I was hooked. Did a few laps on this TR2. The thing vibrated. It was, to me, scared the heck out of me. It was so fast. But that feeling of road racing, that it was just unbelievable. So I used to sit and tell my school friends and all my mates at home, like, I'm going to go and be a champion first in South Africa. Now, it seems most people wouldn't really understand the difference between Zim or Rhodesia and South Africa. Those South African guys were almost like heroes. It was a very different, there was a border crossing. I guess it would be like sort of the difference between maybe Mexico and America to a certain degree, but it was a different world. So even the thought of like going to try and win a South African championship, everybody thought I was dreaming. There's just no way. We didn't even have road racing, But as it evolved, for some reason, the organizers put on an event, a South African national event in Donnybrook in Rhodesia. So my brothers had already moved to South Africa at that stage. And I was about 17, I think, and they borrowed a Suzuki 250 production bike. And that was my first race at a South African national on a big track. Never rode any stuff, just thrown in the deep end at a national and went really good. Straight away I was like competitive. And as a result of that, Suzuki had offered me a ride to go to South Africa. Now, as I said, it was kind of at the stage where racing was changing from GP-based Yamaha TZ, Suzuki RGs and all that kind of stuff to production bike racing. And they had a 550 class, which the Suzuki 450 fell into, a 750 class, unlimited. Suzuki offered me, so this would have been 1980, like a factory ride to go and ride their 450. Rhodesia there was a law whereby you were not allowed to emigrate until you had done national service. So there was national conscription. So I had to go and do my national service before I could emigrate. So I got that done and jumped on literally moved to South Africa, moved in with my brother. I used to sleep on the floor in his bedroom and started racing that Suzuki 450. So yeah, just as I said, kind of jumped in the deep end. My first race in South Africa was at Kyalami, which is a Grand Prix track, against the best in the country. So, yep, just jumped in the deep end. But lucky, I had two older brothers with a lot of experience. They had already made a name for themselves in South Africa and kind of guided me. And without them, it would have been really difficult, But yeah, just at the time, it was just, this is what I'm going to do. I didn't give it a lot of thought. It's like, oh, well, I'm moving to South Africa. So as that evolved, I got a little bit too comfortable in South Africa, to be honest. I did fairly well straight off the bat and won a couple of championships. Started making a bit of money out of racing. It was massive over there. We used to race in front of 40, 50,000 people most weekends because we used to race with the cars. So it was cars and bikes combined. So I mean, I guess you could relate it to going to Sonoma and superbikes racing with NASCAR. So there was already a big audience, but the bikes had a big, big following. And
It
got
was
a little bit
not it
comfortable.
was not the same race bikes of today. I mean, everybody keeps saying, when men and ship ran scared. I mean, those were the bikes without delta box frames or radial tires or slicks
No, for
even.
sure, girl. But I think it's all relative, honestly. Like, I definitely am not one of those good old days kind of guys. You know what I mean? I believe these are the good old days right now. From because I'm still heavily involved, and from MotoGP down to every level, AMA or Moto America. I wasn't really here for the Ben Spies and Matt Miladin era, and when it was really thriving. But Moto America is, I think, in a much better place than when I was here with the AMA in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So I think the talent, honestly, I truly believe this, that the talent level is a step above what most of us were in the 80s and 90s. Just because they start younger, they're exposed to it younger, they race,
Yeah, but
when we
you
were young.
you you took around a racetrack machines that were by no means were designed to go around a racetrack. I mean, the
No,
kids
no,
today they take around a racetrack machine that is purposely built, that is
sure.
ultra safe, that you can take all the way to the edge and back and live to tell the tale. Yeah,
Absolutely.
you took bikes that were, the chassis was twisting, right? I mean, it wasn't.
Well,
You
honestly, the
actually,
South Africans,
yeah,
sorry, I
you
keep
guys were the
interrupting
real
you.
heroes.
Well, and I think that was the appeal of production racing in South Africa. As I said, in the 70s, there was a strong scene, but it was all GP based. Like I said, Yamaha TZs. There was a little bit of production racing, but it really started to take off in the late 70s and early 80s. And that was the appeal. Literally, the guys used to take the bikes off the showroom floor. We had to run stock gearing. We weren't even allowed to change gearing. Tape up the lights, take the kickstand off, and typically of any kind of production racing, there's guys who were very clever at bending the rules. And even when I went to watch at Kyalami in 1979, and my brother was on a Suzuki GSX 1100, and I mean, these things are wallowing and shaking, and that was the appeal. And I don't know, we're kind of jumping all over the show here, but I think that's where Superbike maybe lost the plot a little bit. I think they went to try and compete against MotoGP, and I think they just weren't as spectacular. And now, fast forward, I'm not a huge Baggers fan, or I wasn't a Baggers fan, but Baggers has almost done what early production racing did in South Africa. You know, you see these guys, well, but once again, they're spending too much money on Baggers. I think it's becoming a little bit too refined. It almost needs to go back to what it was a couple of years ago when those things really looked like they were out of shape. So, yeah, I know we're kind of bouncing all over the show a little bit here, but once again, I think it's all just that's all we knew. So um, I stand by it. I think anybody in this current era, and I'm going up to the top, like Mark Marquez, for instance, I truly believe he would have been competitive on anything, on a 500, fire breathing, whatever. Like I said, they grow up riding, especially in Spain. When these guys can walk, they're at these little karting tracks, riding pocket bikes. And then because of Kenny Roberts and certain other people who kind of got the ball rolling in Spain, they're riding supermoto, motocross, flat track, you name it. So they've become more well-rounded than what the Americans used to be. So they're kind of leading the charge. I mean, stating the obvious here. But I truly believe that the riders of today are just more rounded than what we were. Now, like you said, absolutely, tracks are safer, all that kind of, just the riding gear is so much safer, all that kind of stuff. So, and speaking from experience, I lost a brother. So I've seen it. I've seen the dangers. But having said that, every time Cam rides, I'm holding my breath. It's like, oh boy, just please God, So yeah, I think it was just for us in South Africa, it was right time, right place. We had a couple of world champions, a guy called Court Ballington, who won a couple of world championships, or maybe four world championships in the 70s. Another guy, John Eckrell, who won in the 80s. And that just, there was front page news in South Africa. It became really, so that created a following. I think that had a big influence on the bike market in general. The bike market exploded, motorcycle market exploded. And literally front page news. We would race on a Saturday, and Monday, honestly, it was front page news. Kyle Army, so and so wins. So just right place, right time for us. Yeah.
But to your point, Robbie, I mean, today's athletes are also made to be at the cutting edge. I mean, they got a physiotherapist and they got a psychologist
Yeah,
training them, and they got
exactly.
trainers, and then they got suspension engineers and electronics engineer and aerodynamics engineers. I mean, the whole
Exactly.
thing is just so. Back in the days, how did you train? I mean, you just jumped on a bike and started going, or how did you get up to speed?
It No, Bill, that's interesting because so like I told you, in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, we used to compete in a bit of everything, whereas the South Africans generally would only concentrate on one discipline, road racing,
Mhm.
motocross, or whatever it may be. So I think it was 1980, there's a guy called Peter Clifford, who's a well-renowned journalist from the UK, who now runs, well, he has run the Red Bull Rookies Cup in Europe for a long, long time. And Peter came out to do a tour, and he came up to, it was kind of just transitioning from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. I remember him saying to us then, you guys don't understand all this stuff that you're doing, even trail riding. We used to trail ride every weekend, flat track, not foot ups trials, you name it, everything. And so that was my training. Just, but having said that, my eldest brother, he was a sportsman anyway. So we had that discipline, like, okay, go to the gym. I started training when I was 16 years old. And I'm not going to lie, at sort of 15, I went off the rails a little bit. I mean, we were drinking. Like at 15 years old, I was drinking 8 beers every weekend. Well, not every, at least once a month. I'd go out and get a bit hammered. And I woke up one morning, I think I was probably 16 years old. And I woke up one morning, I'm going, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? And I read Husqvarna had a training manual written by a guy called Heikki Mikkola, who was the world motocross champion at that stage.
Mhm.
And I started following that training manual to the point where they go, riders should get 10 hours sleep a night because the week of the race, generally you don't sleep so well. So you kind of need to get some sleep in the bank. And so I was like, well, I'm going to sleep 10 hours a night, and then they had these studies whereby they studied Tour de France cyclists, Eddie Merckx and those guys back in those days. And they at their peak, and then they got them all drunk and went off like a week's sort of big party. And whether it's true or not, I don't know how accurate the science was back in those days, but it was like it took them 3 months to get back to the same level. Now, I don't know if they were doing VO2 max tests and all that kind of stuff, but as a kid, that made a big impact on me. So I said, well, I got to run, I got to swim, I got to do isometrics and whatever it might take. Having said that, certainly amongst the older guys, there was still very much a party culture. I mean, it was very common for the guys to go out the night before the race and have a few drinks. I like to believe that I took my racing in that respect really seriously. Um, so there weren't maybe not that many of us, but the one thing throughout my career I can look back, I couldn't have really worked any harder in terms of physical fitness. Could have maybe done some more mental stuff. And as
Mhm.
you said, it's evolved to the point where the guys are going, they're going visual skills experts now. They're doing all kinds of training. So it's a different world. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the reason that you look so good today is because you took care of yourself when you were 15. Because we know a lot of guys. I mean, there was a racer. I don't know if we should mention his name that recently passed away, and he was struggling with alcohol, and he was a super bike winner. So the fact that you stayed away from all the bad influence, I think, is why you had such a long career racing,
Yeah.
and you're also
I think
keep in
so,
shape
Dal. But
now.
but I do believe there's a balance. Honestly, I think I maybe went a little bit overboard. I think there is a balance. and I talked to my kid Cam, I'm going, man, if you the night, especially the night after the race, like Sunday night, I think that is the time to let go a little bit. And if you want to go and have a couple of drinks, I think that's the time to do it. And I mean,
Yeah.
you've had some guys on your podcast, and Colin won't mind me saying, Colin knew how to party, you know what I mean? So I think there is a balance. I think you got to find that just have a good time, know when to be serious, when to kind of keep it a little bit light. Yeah, I might have gone a little bit overboard in the drinking area. Now, there was a year like 1987, I did the same thing. Sort of, yeah, Saturday night, I did go a little bit, had my 3 drinks or whatever, and probably the best year I ever had. But for whatever reason, when I came to America, I was like, no, I'm not drinking anymore. And I've got nothing against drinking. It's not like I'm, dead against alcohol or something. It just didn't really work for me. But like I said, I think there is a balance. I think there is a room to have a bit of fun too.
There's actually a history of I don't know if you ever raced with him or against him. Grammy Crosby wrote a book about his adventures. He's a
I read
Kiwi,
that
and
book. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean it's all smoking, drinking till 5 in the morning, and on the racetrack at
Exactly.
6:30 doing an endurance race, and they won. So
Yeah, and honestly, not well, that kind of put me because I was a fan of Graham's, I didn't know. I never met him, but it did put I didn't enjoy that book because it was just too
too
much
much.
of that. Honestly, it was like I kind of lost a little bit of not
Yeah,
respect for him because I mean he's just telling it like it is. And I read John Hopkins's book, same thing. It was like, whoa, I didn't, he had some real demons. But yeah, there was a time, there was an era where maybe you could get away with it. And trust me, I truly believe Marquez and Rossi and them, they let go, because my kids have been in parties after Coda, they ended up at the same parties and as Marquez and Rossi and them. And those guys know how to enjoy themselves, But like I said, it's just knowing when to go, right. This is I'm putting my head down, and then Sunday night I'm going to let go. But yeah, that I'm glad you brought up that Graham Crosby thing, because I was a bit disappointed in that. Yeah,
yeah.
but
For me, it was a
at
fun
least he
ride
told it
because
like
it
it
was like a
is.
circus, and they just made
Yeah,
it through, powered through. I
yeah,
don't know by what miracle. You would not think they would make it, just at all, and
yeah,
they powered through the whole thing, just operating a circus on wheels, essentially.
yeah. And going back to Graham Crosby, he achieved probably everything that he could have anyway. The guy. I think he won Daytona. He won all kinds of stuff. So. Um, and when he looks back, he probably goes, "Man, I had a great time doing that as well." So, I don't want to criticize. It's not like I'm criticizing. I was just like, I was a bit disappointed that the book was more about his partying antics
Yeah.
than the racing side of it. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
Don't
it's not a book you read if you want to learn how to ride better. That's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
don't forget there
But
was
once
there
again, I
was
admire those guys for opening up. When I like going back to John Hopkins's book, when I read that, I was going, "That's brave of him to lay it all out there." So, you know, yeah,
don't forget there was a lot of money back then, way more than what we have today running around the sports. So all the cigarette money, um,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
still knew how to have a good time because they were not thinking about how am I going to be presentable to get the next sponsor.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
Robbie, you mentioned something casually, and to me that's fascinating. I wanted to go back to that. So, I've done flat track. I've done a little bit on a little circuity route, dirt, and they would spray a little water to make it more slippery. You
Right.
guys sprayed oil? Tell
Well,
us
so
about that.
it was, but no, but it became almost like riding on pavement, unless it rained. Obviously, a little bit of water on that wouldn't have been good, but it wasn't slick at all. Like it was blue groove, like honestly. So that's where I learned how to use the front brake. So we used the front brake. It was almost like road racing on dirt bikes. And so going back in the 70s, the guys were riding, Matches and Nortons and all that kind of stuff. And then it evolved more to like more motocross type bikes. Um, but yeah, we learned a lot without knowing it. Honestly, I didn't realize what we were doing at that stage. It was like, yeah, we're out there having some fun. So um, but yeah, oil based, and I think they did the same thing in Australia, and might still do the same thing in Australia. I've heard of oil based tracks in Australia too. So
So the dirt gets stickier and it grips a little better than, I guess, wet
it's
mud.
yeah, the best way to describe it, it becomes almost like a blue groove, but a wide groove. It's not like a little narrow groove kind of thing. So just yeah, it's almost like riding on pavement. Um, so and we used to use like Trials Universal tires, I think it was. So yeah.
And how long did it take to wash yourself after falling on the oily dirt?
No, I had my first race in my life. So I'm 11 years old, and my dad bought me a Yamaha AT1C, which was like a 1969. So I was already 3 years old when I got it. So we go to this oil-based flat track, and man, I'm going down the straightaway and it hit a little hole or something. Top, well, I guess I think I was in top gear. It felt like top gear. Got a big tank step and went over the handlebars. So myself and my two brothers were sharing the same bike that day, and I land literally almost in my sister's car on the straightaway. And I'm all like, kind of like, first crash. What's going on here? And I'm wearing my cousin's Bell Star. This is 1973. So I'm wearing this full face helmet, which was too big for me, and the thing's like sitting sideways on my helmet. I just see my two brothers legging it up the straightaway to come and make sure that the bike is okay, because they're going to do the next race on this thing. So yeah, it's but we moved pretty much to just a dirt, more like a decomposed granite tracks after that. They phased the dirt, they phased the oil stuff out pretty quick.
Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I haven't seen that ever. It'd be fun to bring it
Yeah.
back.
Like I said, I think Australia might still be doing something. And the Australian flat track scene it's produced a couple of hotshot. Casey Stoner for one of them, is one of them. So yeah, that whole Aussie scene is pretty good too.
I believe any racetrack that has Ducatis on it would eventually become an oil-based racetrack.
And MVs, don't forget.
Please.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, but I don't think the environmentalist would let us do this anymore.
Nah, exactly. Yeah. But no, and then I think going back to your original question, I think you asked me how I got to the States. So yeah, I know we've been kind of wandering all over the show here, but as I said, I got really comfortable in South Africa. I was making a bit of money, got involved in running a dealership with my brothers and some partners and stuff. And then it really kicked off 1987. We had a big international there. Fred Merkel came out, Doug Poland, Michael McDowan was there, a whole lot of Rob Phillips, some big names. And I did, my results weren't great, but I still showed what I could do. And I was a lot quicker than they were. And I had a friend of mine who's going, man, you've got to get out of here now. I was already probably 25, and it was the spark that I needed. And Hawk Ballington was racing in America at that stage. So for 1988, I did a deal with Hawk. I rented. He had the 250 GP scene was pretty strong in America at that stage. So I rented a Honda 250 from Cork and came over and did Daytona, Loudon, Elkhart Lake, and Laguna. And I was hooked. I loved America. But there's a bit more to it than that. Obviously, my goal as a kid was I wanted to become world champion without really knowing what that meant, but to race in Europe. With the anti-apartheid movement in Europe, we couldn't get a license to go and race. So the AMA kind of gave me a license to come to America and got welcomed by, competitors and everything. And I just loved the place, honestly. And once again, Kenny Roberts, through reading magazines and stuff, I followed the American scene pretty closely, and I came here with stars in my eyes. I was at Daytona and meeting Mert Lowell and Gary Nixon, guys from On Any Sunday, and it was surreal for me, honestly. So got hooked and was determined one way or another to try and make some kind of career in America.
And then you 1990, you're winning the season finale in the Wera Pro Formula USA and Road Atlanta.
For sure. I know, and when that was all happening, um, not that I didn't appreciate it, but now later on in life, I look back and I go, that little kid sitting in a classroom in the middle of Africa where there's no road racing going on, telling his friends that I'm going to be a champion somewhere someday. And then Kenny Roberts was an absolute hero of mine for a couple of reasons. My first bike was a Yamaha, so I was a Yamaha fan. But Kenny had this persona. had everything going, everything about him. And next thing I'm playing golf with Kenny and hanging out at his ranch and going to his New Year's Eve parties and stuff like that. So yeah, looking back, it's stuff that dreams are made of, I guess. And put that out of my mind for a long, long time, honestly. They're like, oh, it happened. But just fairly recently, and it's because people remind me of that as well. I go, yeah, that was pretty neat.
I
So,
mean, the grid was insane back then.
well, that GNF for sure. Look, I was lucky to a certain degree winning that race, but I think I made my luck as well. It was the first time I was riding the 500. Scott Russell was there with a shot rod muzzy. The thing was really quick, but I'd done some really quick laps in practice as well. Um, Mike Smith was on the grid. So Mike had a problem on the start line. Scotty had some kind of issue also. I think he had to start maybe from hot pit or something like that. But it was the days before tire warmers somehow it was, I guess, Thanksgiving. No, not Thanksgiving, Halloween, probably like October 31st. So it's already cold in Atlanta. I'm running slicks with no tire warmers. So the first couple of laps, I had to take it so easy anyway. But I just remember getting my pit board. Scott was coming through, and I got it to he got to within about 3 seconds of me, and just kind of maintain that pace, maintain that pace. So, yeah, it was a big moment, no question. And came with a really nice paycheck, which was the biggest thing. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, back then they paid well with races.
That where, the Formula USA, sort of 1990, 91, that with those 2 years we did it, it was nice. Some really good contingency money. I think beside the purse money, there was good contingencies, and so yeah, I think it was not huge money by any means, but 11 grand I think it was for a win in those days, which in 1990 was not too bad. It was reasonable money, I guess.
It's a down payment on a house.
Exactly. Well, I think where I lived in Modesto, you could buy a place for 40, 50 grand, back in those days. Not nothing special, obviously, but so it's all relative. But yeah, no, good. Like I said, on reflection, it was like, man, I guess I should give myself some credit. I didn't really feel like I'd achieved what I wanted to, which we can get into. I think I let myself down a little bit on the bike preparation side, just not putting enough thought into getting the best out of my equipment. Where some of my teammates, like Rich Oliver, I mean, he was so good at making sure he had the best bike available to him. Whereas, especially on the 500, it was like, put gas in that thing and I'll be okay. And I should have probably paid more attention to making sure that I had better motorcycles, especially as I become later on, like becoming a crew chief and realizing the importance of, a couple of clicks on suspension sometimes can make a difference. So I just didn't pay enough attention to that stuff.
Well, it was also the 500 versus the superbikes, right? And someone whispered in my ear that you had some sort of team order not to make it too obvious.
No, no, that was so. I mean, we weren't allowed to say that obviously at the time, but yeah, Kenny very early on, he goes, "Hey, look, guys, pretty much certainly until cross flags in those days used to be half distance, like make just kind of race with the four strokes. Not to take anything away from the four strokes, because those guys could pedal those things. Honestly, Kurt Hall, Mike Smith, a whole bunch of names, and we didn't have much on them down the straightaways because they had 1400 cc methanol breathing monsters. Road Atlanta, like I couldn't really pass the guys down the straightaway, but the 500 obviously accelerated a bit harder. I think the 500 was probably harder to ride on our tracks. I mean, some of the tracks we raced on, Pocono, for instance, I mean, that thing is not designed for a 500 two-stroke GP bike, really bumpy. Um, so not to take anything away from the guys we were racing at. Like you said, we were just on better equipment. We were on $1 million prototypes with, they were on home built, so not home built, but the Yosh bikes were Trek, but for sure not at the level that we were racing. So
Yeah, so this is to all the guys that were racing against you guys on superbikes, and they're probably in their 50s and 60s now. The reason why you saw those MotoGP bikes, was it was team orders. It wasn't because you were in the same level.
Yeah, well, it's and yes, except for sometimes it just took me a longer to get going. Honestly, it was like for whatever reason, I would take a few laps to get going. So, but with the knowledge, like, well, I'll get them. The problem is that Rich Oliver didn't really get the memo.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I
yeah,
heard.
yeah, Rich used to take off. He was clever, he was pretty smart about it. But that's why I say Rich was really ruthless in his whatever it took to win. He didn't care. He didn't care who if he peed anybody else off or. Whereas maybe Kenny was honestly my hero, and I wasn't going to do anything to upset Kenny. So I used to play that game, and typically Rich would then have a couple of seconds on me, and sometimes I'd chase him down, but he beat me a lot more than I beat him that year. So in 1991. So maybe I should have ignored ignored the memo as well. But
That's what
yeah,
my source told me. So you
yeah, no,
shouldn't
no,
ignore it.
and honestly, I didn't. Nobody said anything about it for a long, long time, and then there was an article in 2010 in Cycle News when I was here working for the Pat Clark team, an interview with Rich, and he kind of said, "Yeah, well, he used to stretch the instruction a little bit. So, and that was the first time I'd never mentioned it to anybody. So Rich was actually the first guy to bring that up.
Okay,
Yeah,
so if it's common knowledge, I didn't think anybody knew about it. So if it's common knowledge, I'm going to say that Steve Biganski spilled the beans. Big
yeah,
nasty
yeah, yeah.
racing.
Yeah, well,
You can't keep a
well,
secret, Gal.
Can't keep a secret. Luckily, we're not
nah,
journalists.
yeah. Well, no, I mean, and I don't think Kenny would mind us saying that right now. Anyway, it's and it was better for the show. Absolutely, just.
Yeah.
But trust me, it wasn't like we go, okay, well, it's time to go now and get away from those guys. It still took a big effort to beat them. So I don't want to demean the guys we were racing against because, like I said, they could pedal those big bikes.
Yeah. And somehow they had to promote kind of the cleaner engines for the sake of competition and just motorcycle building anyway, or
Yeah.
manufacturing, I should say. So, Robbie, how were team structures back then? Because you mentioned like if I had paid more attention to my bike and my settings and so on. I mean, did you guys have engineers around you? Were you on your own? How did it work?
Nothing like it is today. It's certainly from what, even with the team, Marlboro Team Roberts, I had a pretty young mechanic. Rich had a more experienced New Zealander. Um, and one of your guests, Andy Leisner, was actually our crew chief. And Andy's been on your show before. So Andy had just given up racing. So he was also trying to find his way. Not a lot of science involved, honestly. That year was, like I said, pretty much, well, let's put some gas in that thing. I don't remember making many changes at all. The only thing for sure, we used to do, the 500 used to have a preload adjuster on the left handlebar. So for sure, as the gas level got lower, we used to play with the preload a little bit, or you could just play during the session. Um, but, and if I'm perfectly honest, I didn't really understand it. Rich was like, I'm going to put on different offsets. And well, I don't know why. I don't know why you're doing that. And that's one of the sort of hiccups about growing up in South Africa with production bike racing, where we're not allowed to even change gear ratios. I never paid attention to that stuff. Whereas, and I think Americans, I don't know if it's just by nature or generally, were just more inquisitive. And it's certainly, like I said, Rich was like always trying to get the best out of his bike. He was a little bit, maybe a bit of ahead of his time, but I didn't understand trail, rake, none of that stuff. It was just like, yep, let's go. But I did lose my way. We went to race in Canada at Shannonville. And Shannonville's almost like a little karting track, or big karting track. And that I couldn't stop that 500 from wheeling. It was just wheeling everywhere. So we lowered the bike. And then it rained and didn't do very well, but kind of never really raised the thing back up. And I lost my way for a couple of races. I really struggled and I couldn't pinpoint it. And then it was like, oh, lifted the thing back up and got that feeling of it pitching again and, the center of gravity. And so, like I've said, I think if I was more aware or if we had a better support structure, we could have probably done a little bit better. Now, I'm not going to I'm not going to pretend that we were at a world level on those 500s. I mean, we tested at Laguna before the GP, and Wayne Rainey came past me like up over one, and I actually caught him a little bit on the brakes going into two. Sort of in two, I ran with him, and I remember thinking, "Geesh, this is quite easy." By the time we got to turn six, I couldn't actually even see him. He was gone. So, but having said that, certain racetracks, I think Willow Springs that year, Eddie Lawson and Barros won the Kajivas. And I heard they went to test the week after we did the Wera race there, and they were only about half a second quicker than we were at Willow Springs. So, there were certain places where I guess we went okay, but we didn't ride those things to. I can't begin to pretend that we were anything like Wayne and Eddie and those guys.
Did you ever ride any of your teammates' bike that was set up differently or their bikes and go, oh
No,
my God, I'm missing a boat here?
no, I never did. Yeah, and I don't think Rich would have let me do, like I said, but no, I never did. So, for sure, later on in life, I became a test rider for Kawasaki. I used to go to Japan to test their 250. They were trying to come back into the 250 series, 250 GP stuff. So I guess 1991, maybe 92, that was about it. Yeah, I used to go. And that's when I started learning more about the development side of it, what rear linkages do and just a little thing like even changing the wheelbase of the bike, changing the gearing and moving the wheel back and forth in the swing arm. I mean, I know that's minor stuff, but it has a big effect on the bikes, which I never even used to consider when I was younger.
Yeah, that's very difficult. I dealt with myself, but a lot of new riders trying to get better. And it's, I guess if you don't learn about it, read about it enough, and somebody coaches you, it's almost impossible to get feedback. Like I've used the suspension guy a few times, and he's like, "So what are you feeling?" I'm like, "I don't know. It
Yeah.
rides fine. I'm
Right.
going as
Yeah.
fast as I usually go. I don't know what to tell you."
Yeah. 100%. I mean, in 1989, once again, was teammates with Miguel Duhamel, and we had a British guy, Alan Carter, on our team, and we were running some Aprilia 250s. And Alan was like, man, I need a softer or a stiffer shock spring. And I remember thinking, how does he know that? I couldn't pinpoint that. It just everything felt okay to me. So yeah. And like I said, later on in life, being exposed to teams like Pat Clark and then working with some really clever guys later on in life, it was like, man, I wish I'd have worked harder at that.
I think a part of it is circling back to what I said before. The motorcycles you started on, racing
100%.
on, had none of
Yeah.
that.
No.
You would just go out there and do your best
Yeah.
and just make him do what you want them to do in order to finish. And then once the more modern stuff came in, it was I think too much to fiddle with, and you probably just put it in the back of your mind and said, I can do it without it. I can just put the bike where it needs to be. That might have been a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having said that, I also knew, like, I kind of began to really understand what I wanted to feel out of a bike. And I was very front end orientated. If I had to have a front end that I felt comfortable with, and the rear up, for the most part, you could put anything on the back then. It didn't really bother me that much. But talking about switching bikes, so maybe I did actually. So when Fred Merkel came to race in South Africa, he had set up his bike, and they were production VFR 750s. And I set up mine, and then we did switch bikes. And I did not like the way Fred had that thing set up. It was really soft on the front, and I was like, that's not for me. And I don't think he liked my bike either. So absolutely, that feel like I had to have a front end that I was very comfortable with.
Yeah. It almost feels like it, in the old days, it used to be a lot about the racer. And now it's entirely a team sport because you hear, modern racers, especially MotoGP, often saying, "Yeah, there was something with the bike we didn't find, or we're missing
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
or that
yeah,
tire didn't work." And it becomes sometimes they'll say we made a mistake. They're honest people, but they often the issue becomes. Thank you for the team because they made me a great bike and I won. Or often I got a problem with the setup. We couldn't figure it out
mhm,
and we
mhm.
couldn't win today.
the data guy sees it before the rider understands what needs to be done. So the rider would come off the track, and the data guy would already, it would know what's going on with the bike and what's wrong.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm glad that I'm still involved in a big way. And man, the electronics, everybody hears this all the time, but until you're really exposed to it, you cannot appreciate how much the electronics determine just so much on a motorcycle these days. Now, there's still some good old-fashioned. I was Bobby Fong's crew chief last year, and honestly, there was a lot of time when I would go and, especially in testing, I would go and look, I would go and watch on the side of the track. We went to Podium Club, for instance, and you can see a lot of the track at Podium Club in Arizona, and had a really brilliant electronics engineer, and Nick Seiling is his name. And Nick also manufactured the swing arm for that bike. And sometimes I'd go, Nick, I'm going to go and watch out on track. And I'd literally be on the radio and I'm going, man, that thing looks too stiff, or whatever it may be. When Bobby comes in, take a bit of preload out, do this, do that. And oftentimes it worked. So there are some teams, I think, who just look at that data, and especially the European teams, where I think is where a lot of Americans struggle. They need to take their crew chiefs with them, because you'll go there and they go, this is what the computer says, and that's what we're doing. But I still believe there's room for a rider sort of relationship with his crew chief, or is just more, you know, relying on the rider's feedback too. And then data for sure, especially if you've got two riders in a team, just comparing, where's this guy putting the brakes, what brake pressure is he using, when's he letting go, when's he cracking the throttle, what speed is he using, is he carrying too much speed there, which is compromising his drive. So I think data is really, really useful for sort of comparing for riding techniques on in terms of suspension setup. I'm not, probably don't know enough about it, but I still believe there's room for old school, like, hey, what do you think? Let's just try a little bit of this and try something. And so, like I said, it's with Nick and I, we used to joke, it was kind of like where digital meets analog. I'm still at analog and he's a digital guy, but it worked for Bobby, So yeah, there is room for it.
Yeah, it sounds pretty complex. I mean, I've spent some time sponsoring a race team in Moto America, and I got the privilege to sit in the garage and listen to them. I mean, often it's an equation with seven variables, and it's one equation. And now you got to go a little bit by gut and say, well, it could be six different things, and if I change all of them, then we don't know where we are. So I think it's going to be that. And between you and the rider, you just make a call and see if that makes a difference.
No, for sure, we have some tools that are really valuable, like that MotorSpec program. So when we've got a setup that's really working, MotorSpec will give you all the numbers, rate, trail, anti-squat, swing arm angle, all that kind of stuff, So it's really nice to have that reference. The data is massive in terms of like, yep, it's just using too much travel here. The velocity, the suspension velocity is off. So like I said, in terms of a crew chief, and I tell people this, I'll be the first to admit it, I'm only as good as the people I've got around me. I need a good data engineer, if I've got some good chassis guys, but I tend to bring out the best in those guys. Like I've said, that old school meets new school, and having a plan, using some logic. Now, logic is subjective, obviously, because my logic's different to possibly your logic. But a lot of my sort of plan is just ticking boxes and going, okay, I'm with JD Beach now. Okay, JD, go out. You're going to go and do 5 laps. You're going to come in. I'm going to give the front some more preload, or whatever it may be. And I just want you to tell me if it's better or worse. So, as I said, a lot of my sort of MO is just ticking boxes. A guy like Richard Samboli is so incredibly talented and smart and all that kind of stuff. Richard can just look at the data and he'll go, no, the rider needs to do this, the rider needs to do that, So, but like I said, that old school approach of mine has worked with some of the guys I've worked with for sure.
The thing, I don't know why they never did it in MotoGP or Superbike, and I feel like it add, especially for people who don't know motorcycle racing, it would add a lot of attraction to watch races is the microphone. Like if you could get feedback from the rider as they're going around the track and say, try this, try that, and then they can make an adjustment and, during the same session, not waste the time going into the garage. And apparently they considered it and didn't do it for some
Yeah,
reason.
I think it's on the cards again. From what I understand, they've been testing it. Whenever they tested quite a long time ago, and I can't remember who they tested, it was like, this just doesn't work. We can't have that distraction.
Yeah.
Now, boy, I've got mixed views on it because I was a huge Formula One fan, and man, I don't enjoy watching Formula One anymore just because here's this engineer telling the driver, okay, now you got to go, now you got to go slow, whatever it is, and I think there's just too much control anyway. So I kind of like the fact that where the rider's left on his own devices, and I marvel, honestly, at Mark Marquez on the weekend, having to, he's got a 3 second lead or whatever it was, but his tire, now he works out that his tire pressure is not within the parameters. So he drops back and follows Costa for a few laps. So I just like the fact that a lot of it is left to the rider. And like I said, I know I'm old fashioned. And the fact is, I had flip phone up until like as long as I could until 6 years ago, whatever it was. So, but I just enjoy hey man, go and do your thing. And it's honestly put me off Formula One. The engineer and the drivers, yeah, okay. And I enjoy some of the drivers' responses. Hey, just leave me alone. I've got this. I've got this. So, but but absolutely, it would be interesting, to hear that interaction. Yeah. But I just don't like the driver being instructed what to do all the time.
Yes, and it's probably distracting, especially if your engineer butts in at the wrong time. In a
Yeah.
car, it's a little safer. In a bike, it's a little more dangerous. But I think the entertainment value would just go up
Yeah.
tremendously
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bantering on F1 is just hilarious sometimes.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should start watching it more because it put me off. But you can only watch so much motorsport. And I watch MotoGP, I watch World Superbike, I watch Supercross, Motocross. So I guess Formula One's kind of dropped down the pecking order for me a little bit. So yeah.
Robbie,
Yeah.
you belong to an elite club. You scored points in an actual MotoGP race.
Yeah, I better add that I actually got lapped in that race. So, yeah,
You still scored points.
no, I did. Yeah, and then honestly, so like, as I told you, we went testing at Laguna before that, and like everything, we've got stories. But at the test, there was myself, or Wayne and John Kaczynski, Kevin Schwantz. I don't remember who was the other Suzuki rider at that stage. I must be honest, I've forgotten. And Doug Chandler was having his first year on 500s. There was a Spanish guy, Juan Garriga, at that test, and we were given, I think it was like B grade tires. So John Wayne, the factory guys got best. Then Garriga and Doug Chandler got like a B grade. They then had a C grade tire for the privateers, which was guys like I think with Eddie Laycock and a few other privateers. So in the test, I believe we had the B grade. And I honestly believed I could run with like Garriga. I think I was quicker than Doug Chandler at the test. We got back for the race and we were given production superbike tires to use. So I was like at least 2 seconds a lap slower than what I'd been in testing. And it sounds like a whole litany of excuses, but I told you we had a preload adjuster on the handlebar. So the first day, this 500, I'm coming out of turn four at Laguna, turn three, and this thing is just going, wow, like, and I'm going, just feels too soft in the rear. So I'm kind of dialing in preload, nothing happening. Turned out that we had, Olin's had rebuilt the shock the day before, and somehow the preload adjuster wasn't working. So the thing didn't have any preload. Got that sorted out Saturday morning. The thing was only running on 3 cylinders. And we didn't have a lot of parts. So they were kind of like, let's change a coil, let's change one part at a time. We finally got it running for like Sunday morning. And then the race, the carburation on those 500s was so critical. It was, the initial crack. And I think we were too lean right off the bottom. So you would crack that thing and nothing would happen. And then it would come in whop, with a big bang. And so mixed with the tire situation and all that, I got lapped, but I did my quickest lap of the race on the last lap, so because I guess those tires were just starting to work a little bit. It was disappointing, but one of those things, I look back at those photos and I go, "Yep, there you were on a 500 in a GP." So
Scoring points.
yeah, and Cam keeps reminding me of that. Cam goes, "Dad, you scored points in a GP, so I'll take it."
Yeah, with the best of the best.
It really was. In terms of, no, I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself when I said that I think you could put Marquez and those guys on those bikes. Flip side of that, I think you could put Wayne, Eddie, doing all those guys on modern day bikes, and they're going to be very competitive, probably even with their old-fashioned riding styles. But yeah, I saw Wayne do some stuff on a bike that was like, how does he do that? Um, so yeah, it was just being on the track with those guys was very special.
Yeah. It would be amazing if they could get some of these guys to actually spin laps in a MotoGP race and, give them some time to test, but see where they end up. And more importantly, their feedback about how it feels and uh,
I don't know if that would
comparative.
be. I don't know if that would be fair. I mean, taking the rider out of the era. I think Schwantz did a
Okay.
24-hour race.
Hmm.
Uh,
HR, yeah.
yeah, long Suzuka. I think long
Yeah.
after he
But that's
Yeah.
retired.
SBK.
And
That's not prototype.
yeah, but still, I mean, taking the rider out of the era that he belongs after he wasn't competitive, and it's. I mean, it's like Muhammad Ali versus Tyson or all those. I mean, it's just speculations. I mean, I
No,
would,
no.
I would put them if I would put them on MotoGP bikes. I would let them race against each other.
No, sure. Look, the evolution, what I'm saying is that Wayne in his prime, not well, obviously it's his injury, but there's no ways Mick Doohan could jump on a bike right now and be even close. Uh, all I'm saying is those guys in their prime, if they were in their prime right now, they'd be very competitive with all those guys. And like I've said, if Mark Marquez grew up in that era, I'm pretty sure he would be competitive too. Um, but the evolution, yeah, I think just in tires. And something that Ben Spies said a long, long time ago, when I say long, probably 2014, I think he'd injured his shoulder and he was up in the commentary booth and they're just doing some color commentary. And I remember him saying, even in those days, I think the Bridgestones had come out and that Bridgestone front was just ridiculously good. I remember Ben saying the tires have got too good. They're just too good now. And that has stuck with me. And I believe he's right. I think the tires have actually just honestly got too good. There's no reason why we should be using 16 tires on a Moto America race weekend. It's crazy. And
He
it's definitely introduced a new riding style.
actually Spies I think would still be competitive. I mean, I don't know if you saw him do that lap on a Ducati in Austin.
I didn't,
So they gave him a new V4S to lap around Austin, and
yeah.
he looked pretty good on that thing.
Well, I've got a Ben Spies story actually. So it must have been 2009 when he won the World Championship. We went to Czech Republic to Brno to go and watch. And I'm pretty sure Ben had never been there. In fact, he hadn't been there before. So whatever they get, like 45 minutes, 50 minutes in their first session, 10 minutes to go in the first session, the guys were lining up to follow Ben around that racetrack. It was remarkable, honestly. Yeah. And same thing, they raced at Kyle Army in South Africa that year in 2009. And they put in a new turn. There used to be a chicane, which they got away with, and there was this really quick right-hander. And I was standing on the side of the track, and he was just the standout for me. I'm just watching this. And once again, I'd followed American racing a little bit, so I was a bit of a fan of his anyway. But like I said, Bruno, 10 minutes to go in the very first session, and he's near the top of the timesheets, and the guys are lining up to follow him around the racetrack. So very
He
special.
was on a podcast, and we asked him how do you learn new racetracks, and the answer he gave us was, well, you got to do it until you crash, right, and then pull it a little bit back.
But I don't think he even crashed that much. I
No,
don't think.
just
He
almost crash and then pull it a little bit, and said, I don't recommend it to anybody, but
yeah.
that's
But I think
that's
that's
how he
what
does it.
separates guys like Ben, and I figured out very early when I first met Kenny Roberts, and believe it or not, it was actually on the golf course. I just met him. We go and play golf, and he was a plus handicap golfer, and I was like reasonably high handicap. But I watched his eyes, and he had like addressed the ball, and on his backswing, he started talking to me. Boom, this thing goes down the middle. And it wasn't like he was showing off or anything. And he already had everything in his mind. And guys like him, just their minds worked differently to the average Joe,
Yeah.
which is, I kind of consider myself fairly average. And I remember watching when I was a Formula One fan, to me, Michael Schumacher had that. Schumacher just had this unbelievable mind. Most of us have to work at all that kind of stuff. But with Kenny and Wayne had a little bit of it, I think, maybe not at the same level as Kenny, but his powers of concentration, just remarkable.
Yeah. Schumacher wasn't bad on motorcycles either.
Not kidding. Yeah, I watched him. I think he raced a Fireblade in Germany at one stage, and
Yeah.
yeah, and Lewis Hamilton. He can get around as well. So yeah,
Tell us about the time you almost ran over the flag guy in Daytona.
I didn't know that I'd run over him. Oh no, I didn't know that I'd tried it, but but it's one of those things. Now talking about Steve Boganski, Steve and I didn't. We haven't been in comms for a long, long time, but we just kind of hooked up a bit recently, and it did remind me of 1992 at Daytona, and Colin took off, Colin Edwards, Chris Delizio was second. I kind of came through the pack with Kenny Jr. We've got our way through, and there's no question in my mind. When we went over the start and finish line, I had a Deester bike wheel on him. So I looked up at the scoring tower, and I think Colin was number 45, whatever. Chris at number 60. I was number 16 as third, and Kenny 25 fourth. So I put her on. I get into park going towards the rostrum, and the AMA guy waves me off, and he waves Kenny through, and I'm going, what? You got to be kidding. So I go back to the garage, and Wayne and Kenny, we were sharing the garage next to them, and they're going, what are you doing here? So I said, they gave it to Junior. So that one stings. And once again, at the time, I didn't give it a huge amount of thought. It was like, well, it is what it is. But as time passes, you go, man, that was a bad call by the AMA. Whoever made that call, it wasn't good. Yeah. So I know that, like I said, I had a bike link on him. It was the days before transponders, that still stings a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't
It,
remember trying to run anybody over. So yeah.
that's what Biganski said.
Did he? Yeah, I'll have to ask him about that one. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
then,
tell us a bit about the best rivalries you had during your career, and maybe a little fun story about one or two of your co-racers.
You know, it's hard to it's hard to consider him a rival because he was so much better than us, was John Kaczynski. I raced against John in 1989.
Mhm.
So it wasn't fun because he had like a second a lap on us most of the time. So but I kind of marveled at him. I was like, man, how does he do that? And to back that up, that 1990, when no, 89, sorry, it was 1989, he got a wild card in the Grand Prix at Laguna. And I was on a waiting list. So I wasn't allowed to race the first day or practice at all. So I was out there watching. And John was riding a Yamaha in factory colors. And I'm watching at turn 10. And here comes this number 19. And I didn't know it was John. And he was just so much faster than everybody. And I'm going, who is this guy? Who is it? And then it was like, that's Kaczynski. And that's the guy I've been racing against a little bit. So I can't call it a rivalry, but yeah, he was one of those guys that I rode enough to appreciate just how good he was. Um, I have to say, Rich Oliver and I guess, had a bit of a rivalry going in America. Back in South Africa, we had a couple of guys. Obviously, my brothers. We had a little bit of a rivalry going. But out of all the guys that I kind of raced against on a regular basis, Kaczynski's the one that just stood out and go, man, he's just a step above us.
Yeah. And what kind of dirt stories do you have on any of these guys? because we always dig for dirt in this podcast.
Well, no, but I was that goody goody, you know what I mean? I didn't honestly like just I was the guy who thought I need to be in bed by 8 o'clock at night. And so I
With whom?
I wish I had some, but truly, truly, like there's nothing I've got no dirt on anybody because I just wasn't exposed to it, you know. Maybe I should have given that a little bit more thought. I'm sure something's going to pop up somewhere along the line, but you know, and then obviously as time passes, you'll go and some of my heroes and go, oh well, yeah, that guy, you know, he was on drugs or whatever it may be, and I can't name names just because I can't prove it. But that was always really disappointing to me when I heard what guys I really looked up to behind the scenes were doing, you know. But I can't honestly say that I have dirt on anyone, like I said, because I was trying to live that clean life and in bed by 8 o'clock every night.
Yeah.
Sorry to disappoint you
Well,
there.
well, not at all. No, but stay tuned. We'll collect them here as
Yeah,
more
exactly.
podcasts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dead right, dead
So
right.
so you
Yeah,
retire. So you retired the first time around. You had two retirements. You retired the
yeah,
first time around, and you go work for Kenny.
yes. 1992 was a bit of a rough season for me in the States. Yeah, I was riding a TZ 250. I might have ridden, oh, yeah, I rode a Fireblade a couple of times with Brett Harrelson, Woody Harrelson's brother. Him and I were partners on an endurance team. And I actually was pretty quick on that, but for some reason the results weren't really coming on the 250. You know, 250 class was really good at that stage. Like I said, Colin, Kenny Jr., Jimmy Felice. There was a lot of quick guys, and I think I got a podium maybe once or twice that year, and then generally sixth, seventh, and didn't really understand it. I just thought I was riding badly, and Steve was helping me, well, was working on the bike, and I think towards the end of the year we figured out that we were running maybe the wrong configuration on the bike with a really thick base gasket, and on that TZ it didn't really work. Um, so I just thought I was not riding good and wasn't having a good time. Like I said, we're having a great time with Steve Bagansky though. I mean, the guy was just awesome to be around, you know. And then I did ride Colin Edwards win and rode in Japan. So at a Wera race, they invited me to come and ride his TZ. And I jumped on that thing and I was quick, you know, without, it sounds like bragging, but I was really quick on that thing. And it kind of made me realize there was quite a big difference between the bikes. Um, some beating around the bush a little bit, but what really happened, we raced at Suzuka, didn't go too bad at the 8 hour. So I started getting a little bit of confidence in myself again. And then Honda had been out of racing officially for quite a while in the States. They had Commonwealth and they had Arian, two brothers racing who were running separate teams.
Mhm.
And there was talk about Honda coming back in quite a big way with a factory supported team. So they entered us. I got invited to ride for them on a Fireblade at Willow Springs at the 24-hour race. And it was like a a combined effort of Commonwealth and Arian Racing, two brothers. So it was Randy Renfro, Nick Arnott, some other journalists, and so I missed like the first couple of days testing, and I got there, and for whatever reason, well, I was pretty quick around there, mainly because I could go through turn 8. So I ended up being the quickest, and so that got me starting the race. So Randy went out to test to scuff in some tires in the morning, and obviously for those endurance races, we used a really hard compound. And the tires were out of route. So I had to start the race with a brand new set of tires, which in today, that's just common practice, but we didn't do that back in those days, you know. So start the race, first lap, I'm kind of cruising a little bit. Second race, I thought, oh, second lap, time to get going. I remember I just passed Jason Pridmore, and I can't remember if it was Mike Smith. Uh, One of the Hammer guys was in front of me, and third lap of a 24-hour race, I have a big crash on this factory Honda, turn 3 at Willow Springs. The thing lands on top of me. I woke up in hospital. My daughter was 18 months old or something, about a year old. And I just remember this screaming, daddy, 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 you know. So it kind of worked out that 92 was going to be my last year. because Kenny had also offered me a job to go and set up his team in Spain. So, yep, I gave up racing at the end of 92, 30 years old, whatever I was. Went to work for Kenny in Spain, and we did a stint in Southeast Asia as well. And within all that, I hurt myself quite badly in Spain at his riding school. And I was like, you know what? I want to go back to Africa. Whether that was South Africa or Zimbabwe, I wasn't too sure, you know. So we ended up moving back to Zimbabwe. And I was still running a team for Kenny in Southeast Asia. So I used to ride the bike a little bit once in a while. And Yamaha in South Africa, I think it was 1998. They said, oh, why don't you come have a ride? So I had not raced at all since 92. And same deal, got back on the bike and the bug bit and 36, 37 years old. And yeah, round two of my career, you know, and really enjoyed it. Those couple of years up until 2001. I think I was probably riding better than I ever had at certain points. 2001, yeah, we it was all 600s. It was all super sport. There was no thousands or anything. So we had the World Super Sport race in South Africa, and we World Superbike and Super Sport. So we had a South African supporting race, and I mean my lap times were really similar to the guys who won the World Super Sport race that same day. Andrew Pitt came and raced in South Africa a little bit, and I gave him a hard time, you know. So yeah, we had some match races, six South Africans, six Australians, six British guys, and I won some races then I was 40 years old at that stage, you know. So then had a really lousy motocross injury at the end of 2001. I won the last national in 2001.
The shoulder, right?
Yeah. First, the guy landed on top of me. I was riding motocross, and this guy landed on top of me, and my shoulder exploded. I put it back together, and just think it kind of came right a little bit, but I was struggling, you know, and I knew my body really well. You know, my pulse rate, I used to check my pulse rate a lot, and my resting pulse rate used to be like 42. And a couple of months later, I'm still in the high 70s, and I didn't put two and two together, but went to see another doctor for my third surgery, and I think he had an idea what because he took a swab, and turned out I had kind of sepsis, three kinds of different bacteria in my shoulder, and it just ate the bone, and ate my rotator cuff, ate one of the biceps, so was left with pretty much a useless left shoulder. Um,
Oh,
so yeah,
wow.
that was the end of my racing career.
Did you ever tell yourself, the 37-year-old self, if my 20-year-old knew what my 37-year-old self knew, I'd have a MotoGP title?
Well, no, absolutely. What if I was young enough? And this is, you know, fast forwarding why I wanted to bring Cam to America is by the time my parents didn't have anything, they were not wealthy by any means. So both my brothers and myself, we had to make our own money to come and to make enough money to come and race in America. And I was already, like I said, 25, might have been 26 by the time I got to the States. And in reflection, if I had been with Kenny Roberts when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I believe I was not a Kaczynski, but I think I could have been pretty close to John, you know, with given Kenny's training, his regiment, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I wasn't the most naturally talented guy by any means, but road racing seemed to come easy to me. I wasn't that great on a dirt bike, but then doing Kenny's stuff. So when I first went to ride for Kenny, his training, I think actually slowed me down initially. Those first couple of years, you know, riding XR100s at his ranch and trying to figure out his riding technique, of knowing when to slow down, when to pick it up and drive off the turns, probably slowed me down. Then I went to work for him in Spain. We had the riding school in Spain. I used to work with Kenny Roberts Jr., with Sete Gibernau. Same deal, standing on the side of the track and I think you need to adjust your line or do this or do that. And for sure, I think later on in life, I probably was a better rider. Yeah, absolutely.
What contributes to a good rider, in your opinion? I mean, you're very technical about it, so I think that's for our audience is a great question to hear from you because you're disciplined, you lived clean, and you've put a lot of thought in your preparation, and you were able to come back at a later age and be very successful too.
Yeah, and as you said, that was as a result of working. I never stopped training. I always used to train. I was physically fit, all that kind of stuff. So um, I think the one thing that came fairly naturally for me was braking. I was always a reasonably good braker, pretty good on the brakes, and that's something that I've today. I had my own race team in South Africa. And when I was trying to identify young talent, the first thing I'd look at is that guy good on the brakes? Because that's something that's really hard to teach somebody to be good on the brakes. So, and once again, you've had Nick on your show, and there's all, like talk about learning how to trail brake, and I just don't. My advice to anybody, a youngster right now, is like, you got to learn how to brake. Now, guys like Top Rack have taken that to a whole new level, obviously. So, and Richard Stamboli talks about it when he took Jake Gagne over to ride in Estoril a couple of years ago. Jake was really good in a lot of part of the track, but just certainly in breaking into turn one, he was losing. So um, work on a braking drill, whatever that is. And you can simulate that on Supermoto. So get out on it. And once again, the guys in Europe now, you can see them on Yamaha R3s and stuff on karting tracks just thrashing around those little things and learn how to brake, learn how to trail brake. So that's something I really identify. And even in my data, when I look at like with JD or with Bobby last year, I always look at their brake trace and the dwell between letting go of the brakes and cracking on the throttle. So my advice to anybody now is learn how to brake as hard as you can or as late as you can. Yeah.
That's great advice. Yeah, a lot of, and you can see the ones who do it really well are always in the top.
Yeah, and once again, so I hadn't really been on the track 2011, despite my shoulder. I did quite a lot of track schools. I do one-on-one with guys, and I could still ride at a reasonable level. And for whatever reason, since 2011, I'd hardly ever been on a racetrack. So a month ago, we were at Mid-Ohio, and Mark Young is our technical director of the team that I work for now. He also runs the Mid-Ohio track organization. So he's got like 5 CBR 500s, which is sponsored by Southern Honda, one of the partners in the team. And he's like, come on, go and have a ride, go and have a ride. And I was like, nah, I'm done. I don't want to ride on a racetrack anymore. I'm done. Eventually, he's got a set of leathers, and the next thing I'm on the racetrack on a CBR 500, having the time of my life. So fast forward, I went back again on Monday and Tuesday to do some track days. And it's the same thing, running with track school guys. They just, corner speed is awesome. Most of them kind of scare me on the corner speed, like almost too fast, but they just, for want of a better word, just lazy on the brakes. So most track school guys, that's the biggest thing you got to work on is just push those brake markers, learn how to brake. And I'm not sure that I know how to teach people how to brake, but just come up with braking drills. And I'm a big believer. I've got to use reference points. Some guys can use depth perception, but I've got to have brake markers. And like, right, I'm going to go 1 yard past it. I'm going to go 2 yards past it until I run off the track. And then I go, okay, well, there's my limit. But once again, Monday, Tuesday, I saw it again. Like corner speed, most of these guys, the average sort of track school guy is really quick, but just not very good at getting in and getting out of the turn.
So
Yeah.
should we register you to for the next round of Arma? You ready?
Well, I'm probably not there at that point, but no. Well, I did an Armour probably 4 years ago. I've got an old Kawasaki KDX, and Armour had an off-road event at Laguna. So I said, you know what, I want to go and ride this off-road event. So I went, but they obviously had the main circuit as well, and there were a bunch of TZ and Honda RS250s. And I remember sitting outside of turn 4 for the first time since 2011, going, I wouldn't mind doing that sometime again. So yeah, and honestly, people they regard me as a 250 or two-stroke rider. I didn't really ride two strokes that much in my life until I came to America. Back home, it was pretty much mostly four strokes. I rode 250s for one season, but I rode for Ducati and then for Honda and typically a four-stroke guy, but yeah, those 250s have still got a special place in my heart, the GP bikes. There's just something about them, mate. And once again, coming to the States, it was just so easy to go to Yamaha or Honda and buy a TZ or an RS 250 out the crate and go and race. Whereas a superbike, to compete against Bubba Showbird on that factory VFR or Doug Poland on the Yosh, there was just no way. So yeah, the 250s served a really good purpose at that stage.
So there's a classics we always ask uh, on this show is, what's your favorite bike you've ridden, favorite racetrack, and maybe a few questions in a bit about favorite MotoGP racer and superbike racer. But
Yeah, yeah.
any order you'd like to address?
No, so favorite track. Geez, there's a track in South Africa called Aldo Scribanti, which I loved. Um, in America, it everybody's going to say Road America, Elkhart Lake for good reason. Such a beautiful place to ride at. I really enjoyed Road Atlanta. Um, and then one of the tracks that I used to ride in Spain quite a bit was Albacete. We used to test there quite a bit, and I really enjoyed that place. So yeah, honestly, I'd given up. I'd retired, but 1993, working for Kenny, we used to do some work on the TZs. This is where I began taking a bit of more interest in the engineering side of it. And we cut the chassis and kicked out the front end half a degree and made different linkages. And so I was kind of the test rider for that. But long story, at Albacete, I think I was quicker than Seta Gibernau when we were testing there. So really enjoyed that place.
Fun.
Yeah. Well, actually, you asked for a good story. If I don't know how much time we have, but the Sete Gibernau story is I arrived in Spain. Kenny was like, right, we're going to start a team in Spain. I had never been to Spain in my life. I arrived in Barcelona. There was a guy called Bob Bernard who had done some homework for Kenny on the whole project. Bob had said to me, hey, there's this kid, Seta. If you need some help, he speaks really good English. And so I called up Seta Gibernau, and he's helping me get the workshop set up. And he wasn't racing. He had raced a couple of years before, but so he was Senior Bulto's grandson from Bultaco. And they kind of got into some financial trouble. And so he was not racing at that stage. I think he was 18 or 19 years old. The team was geared up for Kenny Jr., back by Marlborough. And so one day the phone goes, Seta is literally helping me. We're painting the walls in the workshops. The phone goes and it's Kenny, and he goes, look, Marlborough really want a Spanish rider. You need to look out for a Spanish rider. So I said to Kenny, look, I've watched Seta play around on the scooter and I've seen pictures of him. Can we give Seta a chance? And that was Seta Gibernau's, from painting the walls at the workshop, helping me find premises and all that kind of stuff. Next thing, he was taking his painting coveralls off and going down to the local Garibaldi leathers to get measured for a set of Marlboro leathers. So heck of a story there.
Favorite race bike?
Obviously the 500. I mean that I could sit on that thing in the garage, no matter what. You just sit on that motorbike, and it was remarkable. But besides that, probably my 1985 Honda RS 250. Loved that thing. Really, really enjoyed that bike. But I mean, it goes without saying that 500, just so, so special. Yeah. I mean, just the sound of that thing, just, you blip the throttle. It's so special. But going back to John Kaczynski, he followed me at Laguna, and going back to the sound of those 500s, he goes, no, you're going really good, but he says, man, you got to jump on the cat's tail, And I go, what do you mean? He says, you got to make that thing go. And I remember saying to him, John, well, my cat feels like a lion at the moment. Yours might feel like it, but I feel like I'm riding a lion. But no, just the sound those things made, so can't beat it.
Yeah, it was from 80 horsepower to 160 horsepower, like 2,000 RPMs or something like that.
Yeah, it hit hard. But I mean, they were really tractable. For an average person, you could ride a 500 around a racetrack, just bob, 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 very easily. But yeah, once it hit that power band, it was a different beast, for sure.
Were you
What?
able to keep it in the power band at all times, or did you always have to deal with that slingshot effect?
No, you try and keep it up there for sure.
For
And
sure.
honestly, if I would be lying if I think it was about probably 9,000. The thing used to start hitting hard, but yeah, maybe I do have a bit of a racing story. That GNF at Road America, we used to come down the gravity cavity and up over under the bridge. And the one that thing stepped out on me, bit or it stepped out, and I kind of saved it, And so we were out there. That used to be televised. So I'm watching the race with Kenny during the week. Sorry, guys, I'm going to use some language now because it wouldn't be right if I didn't say it the way Kenny said it wouldn't come right. But
No
so I'm
worries.
more brave. I'm more brave that I'm more happy with myself that I'd saved this big slide. Kenny goes, "What you doing, you pussy? Why did you shut off? You should have just kept the thing on the bar." So yeah, that's what I said. The difference between us and them, they could make the bike, and I'm talking about Wayne and doing, they could really make the bike react to them, whereas I kind of was still more reacting to what the bike did. So yeah, but no, you had to keep that thing on the boil for sure.
And then after it's all said and done, you turn into Cam's dad, right? And
Mhm.
now you're on the sidelines, or you're the team manager or the crew chief, and you watch Cam start his racing career. What kind of advice did you give him?
I mean, yeah, that was a tough one because I got some advice when Cam was about 16, 17, where a guy said to me, a father's job is to say good luck and well done. And that's the way my dad was with me. I could finish stone last. Did you have fun? Yeah, Dad, I'm not, I was just riding a motorcycle. I loved it. So I tried very hard not to get too involved in Cam's racing, but he's probably one of the most naturally talented. And I've worked with guys, Wayne Rainey, all of them. So I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, believe that Cam's probably one of the most naturally talented guys I've ever seen on a motorcycle. If you watch him on motocross bike, supermoto, no matter what he rides. Um, but my younger brother was the same way, incredible talent. It's one of those things where generally guys with a lot of talent don't have to work quite as hard when they're young. So they do need a little bit of pushing later on in life. Um, but for the most part, I just try to be Cam's dad. Good luck and well done. Try to guide him as best as I can. And for sure, coming to America was a big deal. It was definitely double-edged. You know, I wanted to try and give my kids a better life, and I thought America was the place, and I still believe that, obviously. So we had some options for him to maybe go and race in Europe, but I was trying to look beyond racing for him too. And yeah, it was a big leap. Sold up everything in South Africa, came over here, and he struggled a bit that first year. Honestly, it was like I was watching, man, this is not the kid that I know. I knew that he was capable of more, and nothing really fell into place for him. He struggled a lot of the stuff. Just the second year he rode for John Ulrich and had a much better year. Third year he was done. 2017, Aussie Dave was trying to help us, but I really didn't have much left to help with. So um, later on, whenever it was, a couple of years ago, although I was working for other teams, I would watch Cam on that beautiful Attack Yamaha racing with Petrucci and like, Baz and Jake and all those guys, and going, boy, it's special. Yeah, so really, really proud of what he's achieved, honestly.
Yeah, he was the teammate of the most dominant guy in recent history
Mhm.
in Moto
Yep.
America, and he gave him a tough
Honestly,
time.
he did. And with some adversity, Cam hurt his wrist pretty badly the second year on the tech bike. The first, it might have been the first race of the year or second race of the year at Barber. The team had stayed on to do some testing on Monday, and he had a mechanical failure that hurt him pretty bad. So he really struggled with his wrist. So his career is not by no means done, but I still don't think Cam achieved probably what he could have. Not his fault. Like I said, just some injury stuff. And like, yeah, and he's starting to show, I think he really wants it again. Laguna, he had a really good ride on the Ducati. He's got
Fourth.
some good people
Yeah,
behind him again.
I
Yeah.
think he banged with Hayes at the beginning. Went down to
In the first
10.
race, yeah, and then
Yeah,
he got second on Sunday.
yeah,
But he came from a long way back on Saturday,
yeah,
set the quickest lap of the race,
yeah.
so it's been I don't want to say bittersweet because I do know that under some slightly different circumstances, yeah, I think he could have possibly been a champion. Yeah. Well, last year at going into Sunday at Laguna, he was 2 points out of the lead, so and then the clutch broke on Sunday at Laguna, and then Mid-Ohio, he had a disaster. So, yeah, like I said, I truly believe he's one of the most talented guys I've ever seen on a motorcycle.
You saw him bang with Petrucci and Baz and everyone else, and those guys when they came back to Europe, they're winning World Superbike.
Getting on the podium. You're
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah.
Yep, yep.
Did you ever say, hey Cam, let's go to Europe? It seems it seems a little easier over there.
No, not really, because it might be easier for those guys to go back home. They're just more familiar with the tracks, and I rate Jake Gagne so highly. So when he went to Portimao, it was a bit of a struggle for him. But then you look at the guys from BSB, the recent guys from BSB, Bradley Ray, he struggled. Taryn McKenzie struggled. So I think you've almost got to grow up in that environment and in that paddock.
The home
I think it's
advantage.
very, yeah, I think it's very hard to just show up there anymore. And here I am now. Jake Gagne rode for Honda. You remember he took Nicky Hayden's ride on the Honda. And I know it was a struggle for him because the team, once again, wouldn't really make changes for him. And this is the way we set these things up, and this is what the data says. And towards the end of the year, they started setting the bike up for him. And then Honda was not competitive that year by any means, but Leon Cameo was his teammate. And Jake started really giving it to Leon towards the end of the year and Argentina. And I can't, the last year, the rest of the year was Qatar, one of those. And he started doing well. So I look at Garrett Gerloff. Once again, I think Garrett got really affected by what happened between him and Toprak when Toprak was going for the World Championship. But I still believe that Garrett on a really good bike, Toprak's exceptional. Take him out the picture. Bulliger is probably slightly next level, but I firmly believe that Garrett can finish top three in that championship on the right bike.
Isn't Toprak going to MotoGP? There were those talks of.
Yep. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
going to Pramac Yamaha, I believe. Yep. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Talking to racers, American racers who went there, I mean, there's several things. You're competing with guys who are born on these tracks. They've been riding on them since they're 3 years old. The team chemistry, you're dealing with a Spanish team or an Italian team, and they have a culture in a certain way, and it's a different chemistry than your rivals. And the support system is not there too. I mean, over there, your rivals have their families and their fans and their friends, and
Listen,
everything is nearby. And
yeah.
over here, you're kind of,
But I
lonely
tell you,
and
I've traveled
away.
the world enough. I've traveled the world enough to know that local guys on their tracks in their countries are hard to beat. And once again, in South Africa, we had some top names come and race: Ron Haslam, Joey Dunlop, Mick Doohan, Doug Poland, Fred Merkel. All those guys come and race in South Africa, and they struggled. Honestly, they struggled. Within Kenya, I went to work in Southeast Asia. We ran a team in Southeast Asia. Now, whether this sounds kind of almost condescending, but before I went to Malaysia, it was like, these Malaysians, they probably don't know how to ride motorcycles. I figured out pretty
Mm.
quick. Those guys on their tracks, on their motorcycles, were really quick. So, and it's the same in America. You can bring anybody in the world. I think this the way that Bobby Fong rode at Laguna last week, and I work with JD. JD's on a stock 1,000 bike, but I remember leaving there thinking, I think you can bring any guy from anywhere in the world on that day, on that bike, on that racetrack, they're not going to beat them. And that's all we can ask.
Yeah, they know where the potholes are on the racetrack. They know where the lines the lines
Just,
are.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's the home advantage.
Mhm. Yep. Having said that, the European scene, it 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 is it's exploded. I mean, and I truly believe that Kenny had a lot to do with that. through some Spanish guys, Jaime Aguasuari, who was the editor of Solo Moto magazine. They made a real conscious decision in early 90s, like they've got to promote racing in Spain. They want to create heroes, which they thought would benefit the local market, just bike sales in general. So they went on a mission. And like I said, you can go to any recreational karting track and there's a bunch of kids riding around on pocket bikes. And so they've taken it to another level. They truly have, yeah.
How do we
Yeah.
do that in the U.S.? I mean, Motor America does a pretty decent job. I mean, they do a fantastic job in
Yeah,
actually putting up those races. Those races are professionally organized. The TV coverage is
that's
good,
it. Exactly.
but it seems to me like it lacks first of all the crop of young riders, the proper
For sure.
education, and the
Yeah,
second is the demand generation. How do we bring people that are not in the sport to turn on the TV and at least look at it,
yeah,
and once they look at it, they get the appetite of being a fan or a rider.
yeah. I think America's just too big. It's just too big to coordinate an effort like that. Like I've said, in Spain, there was a conscious decision. Guys were like, okay, the Catalonia government, it was, the region in Spain, like they sponsored Kenny because they wanted to create local heroes, but it's a small little region, So um, America's just too big to coordinate any kind of effort like that. Somehow we need to concentrate maybe in one area in America, and I don't know how we do that. Um, Going back to South Africa, Cam's generation, the Binder brothers, Brad and Darren Binder and Matthew Scholz, and they were a product of a development scene whereby, they had what they call Northern Regions Racing, would put on these clinics. They would have 3-day clinics where these kids would go to the racetrack for 3 days, stay at the track. They would get taught media, social media stuff, how to deal with media on track. So all the older guys would go there, and Sheridan Moraes, who raced in America a little bit, and they would go and instruct these kids. Cam was a little bit older at that stage, but there was a concerted effort, and through that came the Binder brothers and Cam and Matthew Scholz, and there's some other guys racing in Europe, some South African kids making names for themselves. A little kid in Moto3 called Ruche Woodley, who's starting to do pretty good. So I wish I had an answer for you, but it's almost like a helpless feeling, like America's just too big to coordinate concerted effort. And like you said,
I mean,
America,
it
Moto
seems,
America are doing their best. They really are. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it seems motocross is more successful, and I have a feeling. I mean, Americans like a huge spectacle, and if it's
Mhm.
not flamboyant and extreme, road racing is. I would argue the accidents are as epic as NASCAR, but I don't know that we've created. You said it correctly, I think, Robbie, the characters and the personalities and the heroes. I mean, like, there's people worship Marquez in Spain. They probably hate him in Italy, but they're heroes. They
Yeah, yeah,
they have a
yeah.
figure that transcends the
Right.
sport. And here it's very tame. And maybe it's advertising. Maybe mainstream brands need to pick them up and promote them, but it's just nobody knows them outside of the motorcycle community.
Well, going back to my era with Kenny, and I remember going to Lodi which is where Kenny grew up. Kenny Roberts grew up racing flat track. So we went to Lodi 1992 for a local race. Bubba Shobert was with us. So Bubba was still really recognizable, but Kenny could walk around there. Hardly anybody knew who he was. We go to Spain in 1993, and Kenny and Wayne Rainey and stuff, and they were almost like movie stars. When we would walk down the street or whatever, it's like, you can see people pointing, there's Roberts, there's Rainey or whatever. So a cultural thing. And for sure, like you said, motocross, supercross has got a huge following here. And I'm a huge motorsport fan, whether it's motocross, whatever it is. But I'll go to a supercross race or a motocross race, and to me, it doesn't compare to. I'll go and watch. Sometimes, as a spectator, I've been to Road America, for instance. I'm going, this is just a better spectacle, but but it is building. There's no question. The crowds, the Moto America crowds this year, probably everywhere we've been, they've been setting records. Um, But developing young talent and stuff, man, I just don't know how we're ever going to compete against the Europeans.
Everybody's mom telling them they can't ride, so that doesn't help. But I have to agree. I've watched, I watched all of them, and really, I mean, BSB is fun to watch. Moto America is more fun than MotoGP.
Agree. Yeah.
Well, I'm obviously biased because although I'm a foreigner, I've always been pro-America since I was a kid, for whatever reason. The Stars and Stripes, so um, I believe we've got a good scene going here. But once again, I'm just not too sure where our next lot of talent's coming from. Having said that, there's a whole bunch of kids. Mikey Sanchez from Texas, there's a whole bunch of kids racing in different series, Italy and Spain and stuff. So yeah, hopefully we get some representation on the world stage pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it was the Speed Channel. If you remember that in the '90s, you can just turn on to the Speed Channel on cable, and you got all the racing you
There it
wanted.
is. Yeah, for sure.
And today, unless you're not looking for it on YouTube or one of those, I don't know, Peacock, one of those streaming services, unless you're not specifically looking for it, you're never going to find it.
Exactly right. 100%. Yeah, like I said, in my day, certainly in South Africa, there was one TV channel. So Saturday afternoon, they would have, rugby is the biggest game, the national game. They would literally go from the equivalent of watching like an NFL game, and now we're crossing over to Kyle Army, and they'd show our race live. So it made such a big difference for us. Yeah, I'm just not too sure how you reach those markets. I wish I had those answers. And Motor America are doing their best. I mean, they've got all kinds of guys working on whatever it is, streaming services and on the organizational side, I believe it's probably one of the best organized events anywhere in the world. You go there, it's like run like clockwork. So I think they've done a heck of a job.
Yeah, I think the only thing that they're missing is a little bit more exposure.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But it's not for lack of trying. I firmly believe they're working on stuff. Like I said, even the baggers thing, for me, that was a bit of a joke in the beginning. I think they hit it right. The baggers has introduced a whole different market. So they're thinking out the box. I know that for sure.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
smart. Harley sells more bikes than all the sports brands, road bikes, road racing bikes
Yeah.
combined.
Yeah. Right.
So it's a great attraction. I think it was a brilliant move, and it's a lot of fun to watch. So good job on
Absolutely.
the
I mean, the
integrity
thing that
company.
worries me, it's just a fragile, it seems a bit fragile to me. It would only take India on a Harley to go, "Oh, we've had enough." And, who knows what would happen. But I'm enjoying it while I can. Yeah, for sure. And then absolutely right now, it's boosted Motor America.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like the way F1 think what they did with Vegas. So the round that F1 has in Vegas, it's insane when it comes to the ticket prices and all the amount of money that people spend on it. Now, as
Right.
someone that lives in Vegas, makes my life miserable because Vegas lost, I think, $40 million on that,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
and a
Yeah.
lot of businesses had to relocate or shut down because there's closures. But for F1, it's insane exposure. Same with Monaco. I mean,
Yeah.
F1 is
Yeah.
Monaco. I mean, when you think about a F1 round, you think about Monaco, the classic, Ayrton Senna and
For
Alan
sure.
Prost in Monaco and Nigel Mansell.
Mhm.
So I think what Moto America is missing is bring your action a little bit closer, uh, so people can see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And like I said, I lost a brother racing because of unsafe tracks. But when these tracks became so safe with so much runoff, I was going, I think we're removing the spectators from that action, that feel, too far removed. It's just natural. The further away you are from something, the slower it looks and the more mellow. Yeah, I'm with you on that. No, there's a trade-off. Man, we can't have dangerous tracks, obviously, but yeah, I think modern day racetracks, and man, because I'm a fan. I watch stuff from the 60s and 70s, and those people used to be lined up on the side of the track, and there were hundreds of thousands of spectators at certain racetracks anyway. So
Yeah, there was an accident I remember with 80 people killed, a car race.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, no
But
worries.
now, just ask Ulrich. I mean, you can air fence the entire thing, and you'll be safe. Runoffs,
Well,
and I mean, you can
yeah, I
do.
mean, John's obviously made that a mission in his life. I'm not sure it was because of Bruce Hammer maybe or something, but yeah, John is he's that's one of his missions, no question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. The hard part is how do you get kids also into this career line when right now it doesn't pay great as a career choice. So people are pushing
Yeah.
them to be programmers.
Well,
being a programmer also
exactly
doesn't
right.
pay
So
well.
and I'm a classic example of I kind of knew better anyway, but it's like, okay, I've got X amount of money and I'm going to put that into my kid, and you've got all these stars in your eyes. Now, I was also living in the past a little bit. I didn't realize I was still thinking about when I was working in 2010 and before that, the guys were making some money, talking about bringing Cam over here, So I think there are a lot of parents in my situation where they go, right, they're going to put everything into it for a couple of years, and then it was a bit of a cycle. So that kid would be around for 3 years. The parent would be paying for a ride, and then it was like, oh, we can't do this anymore. And then the next crop would come through. But I think a lot more parents, it's becoming like, oh, hang on, there's no real character. It's where are we going to make some money out of this? So there's no question that we somehow the riders need to start making more money. And I don't know what the answer to that is either. I don't know how we generate that.
It's viewing
No,
eyeballs
that's
like
tough.
everything. So the more people look at those races, the more sponsors are going to be, the more people are going to get paid. And that's there's no secret
Yeah,
to
no, no, I
that.
think that I think the market had a lot to do with it. The sports bike market was big. I think in when the Mladen Spies era, and then obviously sales just took sport bike sales in general took that big dive. So I think it's market related as well. And you know the whole 2008 2009 crash. I'm not sure. It just seemed like it took us a lot longer to recover from that.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
almost a
bike sales
depression.
haven't picked up. I mean, essentially that's it. But bike sales pick up, there's interest, people watch, the manufacturers pour more money in the sport and sponsorship. I was talking to Andy when it was last year, I think we talked to him or even before. But the glimmer of hope, and actually I see it around the neighborhood even, is little electric bikes. There seems to be a lot more acceptable to moms and parents these days to have their
Yeah,
kids on little electric bikes. They're on two wheels, they're going fast. And
yeah.
so hopefully that eventually will get people into at some point saying, well, okay, I'm a little older. I want to get farther than a neighborhood. Let me get a gas bike. Or maybe Motor America needs to create an electric bike, small
Whatever, yeah,
bikes on
no,
the
100%, and I think it's even deeper than that. So, my daughter's involved with a company, motorsport.reg. They're involved in like signups. So she
yes.
says she was saying even the stay sick sort of introduction of all those little kids' bikes. I think the AMA membership might have grown through all of that. So there's hope. And talking to some friends of mine who have got dealerships in Colorado and stuff, they're going, the sport bike market is definitely starting to, I don't want to say boom, but take off a little bit. So there's a
Oh,
glimmer of hope
nice.
from there. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe these
Yeah,
boys can start making some money soon before Cam
that
gives
would be
up.
nice.
Yeah.
That would be, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, and I think if they promote any of these things, like I've seen races on electric scooters with people in full gear and helmets, and they're a blast to watch because these people are insane.
Exactly.
But you could do something fun, and then the
Yeah.
kids who ride those will go, look, oh, we're on TV and our sport's on TV. And what's
100%.
the next
Yeah.
level up? Oh, 600 or 300.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mm.
So no, I think there's a glimmer of hope. And like I said, for me, Motor America couldn't have done a better job of what they've done, given some certain constraints and stuff. I think they've done a heck of a job, eh?
Yeah. 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 And there's some nice things going on. I mean, there's more bikes in movies now. Recently, I've noticed like the last 5 years, Keanu's playing a big role in, people who follow him are
Gosh,
like, oh, he loves
yeah.
bike. He's very passionate about the sport.
Yep.
So hopefully things will line up
Yep. Yep.
because there's nothing like the feeling of riding a bike that people miss out on. And you
Once
can't do that
again,
anywhere else.
just talking from personal experience, I hadn't been on a track for so long, and riding a CBR 500 at Mid Ohio this last couple of days was. I'm just riding around there saying, "Thank you, Lord." You know what I mean? Seriously, there's just no feeling like it.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't want to ride anything bigger than a CBR 500 if I'm perfectly honest, but just had the time of my life. So yeah, there's no feeling like it.
Oh, they're a lot of fun. I had a buddy who used to race kind of F4 and open cockpit type of car. That's how he grew up. Eventually
Mhm.
switched to motorcycle racing, and I asked him point blank, he's like, it's a different dimension. It's so much more fun, so much more challenging on a bike. I mean, they're both very, very difficult sports,
Yeah,
but you're so much more involved physically, and you're outside. So
yeah,
you're feeling the air and you're enjoying it. And it's just he said, I will never go back. This is the most fun I've ever had.
yeah. I raced a car one time in my life in Zimbabwe. So it was like a caterer, like an old Lotus Super 7, a caterer.
Is that
Yep.
the
I,
three
I hardly
wheeler?
even got it.
Is that
Sorry?
the three wheeler?
No, no, four-wheeler,
Okay.
four-wheeler. It's like kind of semi. There were copies of the original Lotus Super 7. So a friend of mine goes, "Come on, you got to come have a race." So I jump in this thing, and before I go out, all these car guys are going, this thing's got two wheels too many for you, and yeah, no, no, no. So I got and I had a big crash, put this thing into a wall, and took off one side of it. The whole two wheels were literally gone. So I walk back to the pits and I go, well, it hasn't got two wheels too many anymore because there were only two left on the car. So yeah, that was my one and only. That was one and done.
Yeah. Ross is doing great car racing. He just won last week.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that guy's passion for motorsport is remarkable to me. It's just it's one thing I really appreciate about him is his passion is just crazy. Like for as long as he's done it, and I tell people I complain about packing a bag. Every week we're packing a bag to go somewhere. Imagine his life. It's just, and I know he flies private first class and all that kind of stuff, but it's still booking into a hotel and sleeping in a different bed every night. And I don't know how he hasn't walked away from it. So just unreal passion.
Yeah, that's tough, is it? So speaking of which, like favorite MotoGP racer, I guess separate old time favorite
Yeah, yeah,
to
right.
current
Yeah.
racers.
And I wouldn't say Marquez if you want that episode to air.
Well,
Nabil,
We'll
no.
allow
I
it.
mean,
We'll allow
I'm
it.
gonna.
It's not a
I mean,
Ducati. We'll allow it.
obviously,
Nabil doesn't like him very much.
no, but well, I'll tell you, you can press the red button. But no, obviously going back, I mean, I grew up in an era where I followed all these guys. Mike Hellwood was obviously my first guy. Then the South Africans who came along, Corp Bennington, John Eckrold, Kenny, absolutely. And then getting to ride with Kenny, the stuff that guy could do on a motorcycle, I truly believe in my heart he was the best of all time. Maybe he hasn't had the most wins and all that kind of stuff, but I honestly believe he was the best of all time.
Yeah.
Um, and then the whole crop, you know, I think the most underrated, if that's the right word, is probably Eddie Lawson. I was a huge fan of Wayne, still a huge fan of Wayne Rainey. I think he was remarkable. I don't think Eddie gets quite the credit for being as good as he really was. But yeah, we unfortunately we are going to arm wrestle now because I just think Mark Marquez is remarkable. I think he's so so special. Yeah. Now, there's a obviously a Marquez Rossi camp, and I think Rossi was the best thing that the sports ever had. So Kenny, I believe, was the best rider that the sports ever had. Rossi did so much for this sport. There's never been a character like him. Barry Sheen, maybe a little bit, but yeah. So he took it to another level in terms of just the average person. I'm not kidding. You can go to a village in the middle of Africa somewhere, and there's probably somebody who's got a number 46 cap. So, but in terms of just, and it went back to the first time Marquez got on the podium, I think it was Silverstone, maybe when he was like 15 years old on that 125. And if you look at photos from those days, him and Cam have got a little bit of they kind of look a little bit similar. So I just looked at this little kid standing, he may be 2 years older than Cam. I said, man, he looks like Cam, and had this big cheesy grin. And so I became a fan ever since then. Now, on the Moto 2, there's no question he did some dubious stuff on passing. I hated the way he would pass guard and just kind of like push him off the track. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Mark Marquez, honestly. But I don't know if there's a need to be either a Rossi or a Marquez fan. I just appreciate what Rossi did for the sport. but and what Marquez has done is mind-boggling to me.
and still is doing. Sorry,
Yeah, he's
sorry,
an
sorry, Nabil.
incredible. No, I mean, look, I'll admit it. I'm a great admirer of his level of talent. I just think personally, I didn't think he was a great guy. But
Well, so same deal. Like I remember Indianapolis, and my daughter she was in love with Mark Marquez. So there's another reason. But when we went to India, 2015, maybe it was. So Thursday was like setup day. And there's Marquez walking. He's got his backpack on, just high-fiving everybody. I just thought, man, I really like the way he went about stuff, So I don't know him from a bar or so, but and once again, thank God we've all got different people that we kind of support, But I just appreciate all of them. Having said that, I'm a huge Mark Marquez fan, so sorry about that. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's great. But funny enough about Rossi, I just saw a picture yesterday, I think, of Jorge Lorenzo being interviewed and then walking away from the hotel. I think he's going to catch a flight or something, and his roller bag has a big 46 on it.
Is that right? Sheesh, yeah, that's crazy.
Little
Well,
Rossi
one day,
merchandise.
hopefully, one day we see Rossi wearing a number 93 and we see Marquez wearing a number 46. I don't think it's going to happen, but yeah,
I don't think it will.
nah,
No,
nah,
I don't think it'll happen.
nah, nah.
I saw a video the
We,
other day of Rossi standing at the side of the track in one of the races, and Marquez is crashing, and Rossi is just jumping up and down, going like, "Yeah."
Yeah, that made the rounds actually. I think it's becoming
yeah,
a meme.
yeah, I did see that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
no, and you know, there's a little bit of a new crop coming along, so keeping an eye on a couple of the kids and Cam, myself, and my daughter Shay, we talk about all the Moto3 and Moto2 kids, and my daughter's a big Alonso fan, so I'm hoping he's going to be come along one day. But yeah, I think the sport is incredible right now. Like I've said, to me, these are the good old days. There's never been a time like this in every class. Moto3, Moto2, MotoGP, I think is the best it's ever been.
What are you working on right now?
So I work with Real Steel Honda. It's a team that we've got official Honda backing for trying to venture back into superbikes in Moto America. So Hayden Gillum is riding the superbike. I work more with JD Beach on the Stock 1000. And I also work for Danny Walker at American Supercamp. So kind of juggle the two. But my main job is working for Real Steel Honda on a race team. Yeah, it's been oof, a challenge, so just trying to build a superbike is not easy. So Mark Young is our technical director. Um, the ridge looked really good for Hayden. In practice he was going. The race didn't work out quite as good because he got ran off the first race and then had some issues, but Laguna was disappointing. So yeah, just our goal is to try and get Honda back up on the podium somehow in Moto America Superbike. And like I said, JD's riding stock 1000. We had a really good Laguna. So yeah, having a great time. And then get to ride TTR 125s around flat track on with my messed up shoulder, and it's unreal because I get to ride with JD and Dallas Daniels and all those hotshot flat track guys and Cam once in a while. So yeah, I still get to run it in there with us with the top flat track guys. Chris Carr once in a blue moon. So yeah, it's awesome.
And then the last
JD
question, unless
on flat track bike. I had the pleasure of riding with him once at Josh Hayes' house, and I mean he will turn with the bike almost horizontal. I mean, it's a higher lean angle than you get on MotoGP on these bikes, and I'm like, how is that bike still
For sure,
standing
yeah.
up and going?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And then that's where I don't mind bragging a little bit, but I don't believe there's anybody in this country who can ride a bike like Cam, those TTR 125s. Cameron is, and if you watch Cam on those things, you just stand there with your mouth open. It's crazy what he can do on those things. So,
I had a chance to watch him
but
doing flat track. Yeah.
but I feel so privileged at my age that I still get to ride with those guys. Line it up, and honestly, when I'm feeling good, I can kind of run with them still. So it's the best feeling in the world. Yeah, almost as good as riding a CBR 500 in Ohio.
Right.
the last question we have is, how can people reach you?
Well, it's a long road to Owensboro, Kentucky for sure from anywhere. But no, I mean, obviously I've got a Facebook. That's about it. Robbie Peterson on Facebook. I'm not super active on stuff. We did have a family Facebook page. I think it's called South African Motorcycle Racing Petersen Saga. As I said, there was a whole bunch of us. I had three brothers who all won South African championships. My one brother rode MotoGP, 84, 85, 86. We haven't really been much active on that, but if you go back, there's some really nice stories on our family Facebook page. So, like I said, I'm not super active, and more just these days, like I've said, it's more Cam Peterson's dad. Just yep.
Like I
It's
said, like I
it's
said at
it's
the
been a heck of a
beginning,
ride.
like I said at the beginning, you're way more famous than him.
He'll tell me I am, but no, I'm so proud of him and what he's achieved, and so. But
We will probably have
yeah,
him. We'll probably have him in one of our episodes
nice, yeah, yeah,
sometime in
yeah.
the future.
He could definitely give you some inside scoop about boys partying and all that kind of stuff. I think he's got some stories that he could share. So yeah,
We
yeah,
definitely have to invite him soon. I guess
yeah,
we gotta wait until the season winds down a bit.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
All right. That
Wonderful.
yeah. Should we finish?
Yeah, I think Robbie. I mean, anything else you'd like to cover? Thank you so much for being with us and sharing so much time.
no, well, honestly, like I said, appreciate it. My racing often is a distant memory, and the Facebook stuff kind of once in a while, somebody will post something somewhere, and it reminds me, oh yeah, I actually used to do that. So. Just really, I feel privileged the life I've had. Like I've said, the little boy growing up in Africa and achieving some of my goals and ending up, you know, living in America and what this country's offered me and my family. Just it's been a heck of a journey, and it's not over. I'm going to keep striving to. I want to stay in this industry and work with some more young riders and having a great time working with JD this year and. Not going to stop anytime soon. It's keeping me young for sure.
Yeah. If you like what you do,
Well,
you never work a day in your life, right?
Yep, exactly, exactly.
yeah, that's a privilege. And seeing your son also grow in the sport is must be an unbelievable pleasure.
No, it
Congratulations.
is. It is. Like I've said, when I see him on that track with, okay, this year he's down to super sport, but man, there goes Petrucci, there goes Cam, and I'm going, look at that. So
Hey, when
it's
is he getting you some very fast grandkids?
they better hurry up. I've got some great grand dogs, if that's Cam, my daughter, they've got some beautiful dogs, but I'm ready for a grandkid. There's no question. Yeah. So Cam's not quite ready for it just yet, but I think my daughter's thinking about it. So I'm trying to get it.
Oh,
My
really?
daughter's the biggest motorsport fan in the world. She probably knows more about MotoGP than any of us. So it's great. Come Monday morning, she's the first to call me, Dad, did you see this on the GP or whatever? So yeah, we're very lucky. We're a tight family, so very lucky.
Wonderful. We'll find you certainly on Facebook, and everybody should join and follow because it's fascinating stories.
Well, once again, thanks so much, and hope to bump into you guys along the line somewhere.
That would be lovely.
Yeah. Thank you guys
All right.
for
Thank you once
listening.
again.
And that was another episode of Edge Grip Podcast with Robbie Peterson. Thank you.